When I fell sick, I begged my children to take care of me. They said I was too much work and sent me to a cheap home. 2 weeks later, they were shocked when the nurse handed them an envelope. What I left inside changed everything. I remember the exact temperature of the room when I asked for help. A weak kind of heat, the sort that dries your throat without warming your bones. The ceiling fan stuttered like it was embarrassed to be there, and the hospital curtain breathed in and out as if it had lungs of its own. I looked at my son and daughter, a son who bears my nose and a daughter who has her mother's eyes, and I said, "I need you." Simple words, small words. You would think they'd be easy to hold, but they slipped right through their fingers. "Dad," my son said, already glancing at the wall clock, You're just too much work." My daughter didn't look at me when she nodded. It was the way people nod when the waiter asks, "Tap water, okay?" A polite shrug. A cheap choice. They had already chosen the home. I could see the decision stamped on their faces like a stamp on stale bread, ready to be thrown away. If you're reading this, tell me where you're watching from. I want to know where people sit when they hear a father say the softest words he can say, and watch them turn hard in the air. They tell me sickness reveals character, that fever burns away pretense and shows you the core. The doctor's voice was soft, but the news wasn't. "Rest," he said. "Consistent care," he said. I heard the sound of his pen tapping his clipboard, each tap a small farewell to the life I had built with my hands. My son didn't argue with the doctor. He didn't argue with me either. He just smiled, that thin managerial smile that says, "We've already taken care of it." "There's a facility," he said. "Facility, not home. Not place, a facility. A facility has blinking lights, a chart, a billing department. A home has footsteps you know by heart." He didn't offer to wheel me to the car. He signed papers while the nurse helped me sit up. I could feel the tremor in my hands as I reached for my coat, the one my wife used to drape over my shoulders every winter. Funny how a coat can weigh as much as a memory. The drive there was short, like the distance between a blessing and a curse. We passed the lake where his mother and I used to sit after dinner. I wanted to say, "Your mother loved the smell of pine and lake water, do you remember?" But I made a small sound instead, like a moth hitting the window, because some things are better kept in the chest where they still glow. We turned down a side street that even the sun avoided. The building leaned inward, as if it were listening for gossip, its paint peeling like old scabs. A cheap home, the kind of place where silence is the loudest sound. The front desk had a bell that didn't ring, just rattled when you touched it, and the receptionist smiled the way people smile when they are very tired. "We'll take good care of him," she said, and I believed she would try. But care is a little boat, and money is the river it floats on. The river here was very, very shallow. My room had a window with a view of a brick wall that had forgotten what color it used to be. The bed creaked like conscience every time I shifted. A television hung in the corner and spoke in whispers from another patient's remote, and somewhere a kettle boiled and never poured. My son signed the final page, and my daughter stood by the door as if she were waiting for a cab. "We'll visit," my daughter said. The way she said it, the words were already dust on her tongue. My son squeezed my shoulder, 2 fingers quick, and said, "Try to, cooperate with the staff. Make it easy for everyone." Then they left. The door clicked. I lay back and watched the crack in the ceiling draw a line through the sky above me. It is strange, the things your mind offers you when your body is tired. Mine offered me soup and the smell of soap on my wife's wrists. It offered me the sound of my boy's laughter when he was 7, chasing a football down the corridor and knocking a vase we couldn't afford to replace. It offered me the way my daughter danced in the kitchen barefoot, a wooden spoon for a microphone, hair like a dusk cloud. I remembered how I'd fix the fuse in the middle of the night, how I'd sit at the table doing the numbers nobody else saw, the numbers that kept the lights on and the school fees paid. I remembered the first winter in our house, when the windows breathed fog and the walls echoed because we didn't have enough furniture yet. We ate on the floor, and we were so happy the rice tasted like a festival. There is a cruel trick to memory. It doesn't come when you call it. It comes when you are too tired to lift it, and it weighs as much as the person you miss. They came the first weekend. They brought fruit packed in plastic so tight you could hear the air struggle inside. My son asked the nurse about the medication schedule, about the discharge plan, but not about me. The questions were paperwork-shaped. My daughter touched my forehead and said, "Warm?" like she was testing a kettle. They sat for 20 minutes, then 18 the next time, then 10. They kept their bags on their laps, always ready to go. Once I heard my daughter-in-law in the corridor. Her voice clipped like a new pair of scissors. "He's dragging this out." The words crawled under my skin and made a home there. I wanted to say my sickness is not a performance, not a drama to be cut short for convenience. But my voice was a tired river and I couldn't find the banks. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. My anger cooled into a sheet of glass, smooth and cold. I discovered that I could press my palm against it from the inside and watch the outlines of my feelings, and I chose not to break it. There is power in a flat voice. It hides a storm better than silence. The night nurse, her name was Amina, moved like light doesn't scare her, and she noticed the way I looked at the ceiling. "You're making plans," she said quietly. I smiled. The small smile I used to wear when I negotiated prices for hardware, and the other man thought he had already won. "I'm remembering," I said, and then after a breath, "and I'm deciding." She didn't ask what I was deciding. Good people don't ask when a man is measuring his own dignity. I had always planned for what my wife called tomorrow's weather. She would laugh when I stacked papers in our safe, when I made copies and took quiet trips to the bank and learned the language of clauses. "Leave something for the kids," she would say, and I said, "I will leave them more than something. I will leave them a good name. But names are like houses. People can sell them out from under you if you're not careful." After she died, I rewrote the map. I made a will. I hid the soil around the tree of our life so that anyone who tried to uproot it would find the roots somewhere else, strong and alive. I didn't boast about it. I tucked it into the envelope my wife loved to use for birthday cards, off-white, thick, elegant, and I placed it with the papers that make the world listen. Deeds, transfers, instructions, signatures that look like rivers running into the sea. The days folded in on themselves like napkins. Morning pills, afternoon naps, evening TV shows where people shouted and laughed and none of it felt real. Amina would sit at the foot of my bed when her rounds were quiet and tell me about her son, 8 years old, who drew rockets on scrap paper and asked if space had a smell. I liked hearing about a child who wanted to know what places smelled like. I liked to imagine the lake again, how it smelled of pine and rain and something metallic, like hope with a coin's edge. She would bring me tea, too sweet, too hot, exactly how my wife used to ruin it. I told her once, "There's an envelope in the top drawer of my bedside table." She already knew. Nurses know where a man puts the weight of his life. "If they ask for it," I said, "don't give it. If I ask for it, don't give it. If anything happens to me, only then." She nodded. She did not ask what was inside. Good people don't pry. They simply hold what you hand them. On the second Sunday, rain hammered the roof like a crowd demanding an encore. The window shivered. My breath felt like it was borrowed from someone else. The doctor used the word unstable, which is a polite way of saying life is walking on marbles. My son arrived with his wife, a bright scarf wound around her throat like a ribbon on a box. My daughter followed, late, always late, smelling of perfume that said the rest of the world still needed her. They stood at my bed and talked over me. "How long do these things take?" My daughter-in-law asked Amina, as if grief were a delivery estimate. My daughter checked her phone. My son ran a hand through his hair, a gesture he inherited from me, though I never did it while waiting for my father to die. I watched them. I watched carefully. I noticed what the light did to their faces and how impatience wrinkles the mouth before age does. I thought of my wife's laugh, the way it came from somewhere lower than the throat, as if she were laughing with her whole body. I thought of the first time we stood in front of our house with the keys in my palm, and how I shook not from the wind, but from the idea that I had built a door nobody could close on us. "It's all right," I told the ceiling. It wasn't a prayer, it was a conclusion. In the quiet between one beep and the next, I asked Amina for a glass of water. She brought it, and with it, she brought the envelope. She didn't touch it. She placed it on the table, where the light fell into the fold and made it look like a hill in a painting. I looked at my children and said, in that flat voice that hides a storm. When I fell sick, I begged you to take care of me. My son began, "Dad," but I raised a hand. It is amazing what a raised hand can still do when the person raising it has always built, never begged. "You said I was too much work," I continued, "so I made things less work for you." You could feel the room tilt. Amina's eyes flickered, not with fear, but with the way people look at something true. They didn't know that while I sold my hardware business years ago, not all the proceeds walked into the accounts they knew about. They didn't know the villa was not theirs to plunder, that it had never passed to them, that inheritance is not a buffet you get to taste while the cook is still in the kitchen. They didn't know about the education funds I set up for children who draw rockets on scrap paper. They didn't know that my wife's jewelry, her small golden stars, had been appraised and turned into a trust with her name. They knew none of it, because greed is a telescope that sees only the coin it points at, never the sky around it. The rain grew louder, like the world leaning closer to listen. The doctor came and went. My breath decided to be unreliable. My son finally asked, "What's that?" pointing at the envelope as if it might bite. "This," I said, "is my answer." He reached for it, but Amina's hand was already there. "Not yet," she said, and for a moment I loved her like a daughter. "When?" my daughter demanded. "Now?" "Soon," Amina said. She looked at me and I nodded. Soon. On the night the fever pressed its wet hand on my forehead and refused to lift it. The corridor smelled like disinfectant and a forgotten meal. The window rattled like teeth. I closed my eyes and I could see my wife at the sink, water on her wrists, turning to me with a question in her eyebrows. I wanted to tell her the answer now. Yes, I kept my promise. I kept it in an envelope behind a nurse's steady heart. I slept. When I woke, the room was full. My son, my daughter, their spouses, the doctor, Amina. 2 more nurses in uniforms that made them look like the last good people in a story. My son's voice was a string pulled too tight. Is it? He couldn't finish questions anymore. Life has a way of breaking the grammar of those who have not learned to listen. Amina put the envelope in his hands. I watched his fingers shake. Paper makes a sound when it tears, a sound like a promise being corrected. He pulled out the letter first. My handwriting has never been elegant, but it has always been clear. I wanted clarity to be the last thing I gave them. He read, his mouth moved. He swallowed. My daughter leaned in. The doctor looked away the way doctors look away when families start learning the curriculum life refused to teach them. My son's eyes grazed mine and then ran back to the paper as if the words might run away. He read about the trust in their mother's name, one that would fund schooling for children without anywhere to keep their pencils. He read about the villa, how it remained under my ownership and how, as of last month, it had been signed over to a foundation that turns empty houses into libraries and shelters for women who have to pick a door and pray. He read about the business proceeds, the accounts they knew and the accounts they did not, and how the latter had become oxygen for a set of hospitals in small towns where the ambulance siren is the only music at night. There was a paragraph, too, about my kindness and about theirs. "You are not poor," I wrote, "but you have been poor in your hearts. I tried to teach you abundance. You learned balance sheets. When I asked for your hands, you gave me a calculator. So I relieved you of the work you feared. I told them in plain words that I had not left them without anything because I am not a cruel man. I had left them with the money I put aside when they were still small enough to run to me when they fell. A modest sum, enough to be decent, not enough to make greed comfortable. Enough to ask them to work, to earn, to be. And I left them with the chance, written in a line they could not ignore, to volunteer at the foundation to which the villa now belongs. If they volunteered consistently for a year, real hours, real sweat, the trust would match the income they earned at their jobs with a one-time grant to start something of their own. If they chose not to, well, then they would have chosen, and life would be their mirror. My son reached the end, where I wrote, "You once said I was too much work. So I have given the work to the world. There is plenty of it, and it pays in ways you have not yet learned to count." His lips trembled. For the first time in weeks, he looked like the boy who used to cry when he skinned his knee, not because it hurt, but because he hated letting me down. My daughter's hands found the edge of the bed. She did not speak. She set her forehead against the sheet and remembered how soft cotton used to smell when her mother hung it in the sun. The room had stopped breathing for a moment. Even the beeping machine fell quiet and respectful. Amina placed the other documents on the table. Deeds, signatures, the neat architecture of legal language. My son flipped through, and I watched the color come and go in his face like a ghost realizing it still casts a shadow. He reached for me, and that surprised us both, his hand hovering over mine, not quite ready for the contact, not quite ready to admit what that touch would say. My daughter spoke first. "We were wrong," she whispered. Not enough air came with the words, but they made it to me. "Dad, we were—" She couldn't finish, but tears have a grammar of their own, and I have always been fluent. I could have scolded them. I could have let the glass of my calm shatter and slice them to ribbons. But there is a point beyond anger where a man stands on a shore and watches the tide decide. I took my time and then said, "You will learn." I did not say, "I forgive you," because forgiveness is a coin I do not spend to buy comfort for others. It is a light I turn on when the room is ready to be lived in again. I didn't know yet if we would live in that room again, but I opened the window a little, because even brick walls look kinder when air moves. The days after the envelope were thinner, and sometimes they split, and when they did, I fell through them and landed in old places. My wife stirring curry until the aroma walked out the front door to call the neighbors. My son running with wet hair, shouting that the rain had finally come. My daughter sleeping in my lap on a Sunday afternoon, her cheek a warm coin. I held onto those like you hold onto the sides of a boat. And in the waking world, things changed the way winter changes, a degree at a time until your breath stops smoking. My son began to visit at the start of visiting hours and leave at the end. He learned the names of the other residents. He learned the names of the nurses who clean and lift and joke and swallow their own tired. He learned. My daughter started bringing tea from the little shop near the home, the kind that tastes of cardamom and apologies. She sat with Amina and asked about the foundation. She asked what volunteers actually do. She listened. When you listen, the world feels heard and it likes you better. I will tell you the truth. Their regret was a balm, but it was not medicine. The medicine came from knowing I had used my last strength to put the pieces of my life where they would do the most good. It came from the certainty that the house my wife and I built would not be a prize in a fight of entitlement, but a lantern in a street that has been dark too long. It came from imagining a child, someone else's child, opening the front door of my old villa to find books stacked like steps to a different kind of future. It came from picturing a woman with a bruise that has already begun to fade sitting in my old living room, which now belongs to safety, sipping tea the way my wife used to ruin it. Too sweet, too hot, a small victory. One afternoon, when the sun remembered our street and came back to visit, my son showed me his hands. They were nicked and marked in small, honest ways. "We were painting," he said, and then, almost shyly, "the library room." He laughed, a soft sound that avoided his teeth. I didn't know how to tape the edges. Amina had to show me. He didn't look embarrassed when he said he had been taught something. Pride is a heavy jacket, and sometimes you must hang it on a chair to move freely. My daughter posted a photograph from the same day, not of herself, but of the shelf they had built, uneven and perfect. The caption said, "Building rooms that give more than they take." I don't care much for the little squares people put their lives into, but this one warmed my hands. I know what you are wondering. Did I forgive them? The answer is messy, because families are messy. The heart keeps a ledger that no accountant can audit. My forgiveness will come like spring. It will start somewhere underground, and one day, without knowing the exact hour, I will look up, and the tree will be green again. For now, I watch them show up. I watch them bring their hands and their hours to the foundation. I watch them learn the names of women who do not share our blood but share our city. I watch them return from a day of work smelling like paint and paper dust and humility. And I remember what my wife used to say. We are a family if we share the load, not just the last name. On the night the fever loosened its grip and decided I could keep my breath, I dreamed of our lake. I sat on the bench that is probably rotting now, and the pine trees did that thing where they whisper without moving their mouths. My wife joined me without footsteps, the way love joins your life on an ordinary Tuesday, and suddenly your coffee tastes like a miracle. She didn't speak. She pressed her shoulder to mine and we watched the water forget its name. I told her everything I had done, and she didn't say, "Good." She said, "True. If you understand the difference, you understand everything I wanted for our children. I am not a hero. I am an old man who learned how paperwork can protect the softest parts of a life. My children were wrong and they are trying to be right. The cheap home smells of bleach and boiled vegetables, and still, kindness lives in the corridors. Amina laughs like a bell and scolds me for not finishing my soup. The doctor tells bad jokes on purpose because sometimes laughter is a scheduled medicine. And my son and daughter come often enough that the receptionist no longer asks them to sign their names. She knows them by their apologies and by their steady return. There's a library shelf with a crooked board at the foundation now, and nobody will fix it. Because it is a story you can put your finger on. If you are sitting somewhere far away, if you are reading this in a kitchen or a bus or at the edge of your bed with the lamp doing its best, I want you to hear something that took me a lifetime to say without my voice shaking. Family is not the people who inherit your furniture. Family is the people who will carry you, not your body maybe, but your weight, when you are made of more ache than bone. Family is the person who brings tea too sweet and stays to argue about how you drink it. Family is the people who show up after the envelope is opened, after the money sits where it cannot be taken, after the shame has been named and cannot be unlabeled. Blood is just the ink the story starts with. The story itself is written with hands. I still keep one thing in the drawer beside my bed. Not a new envelope, a photograph. My wife in the doorway of the house, her hand on the frame, laughing at something I can no longer remember. My son's head appears at the edge of the image like a rising moon. My daughter's arm is a streak across the bottom where she ran at the last moment, always moving. I look at that photograph, and the glass in me grows warmer. I have learned that dignity is not a mask you hold up. It's a quiet choice you make each time someone underestimates the weight you can carry. When they sent me here, they thought I was too much work. They were right in a way. I had the work of turning my life into a bridge. I had the work of giving away what greed could not digest. I had the work of choosing to become smaller, so that my legacy could become larger than my bloodline. The day I am strong enough to walk to the garden behind the home, I will sit by the fence and listen to the sparrows mispronounce the morning. I will close my eyes and let the sun press coins of light on my eyelids. I will think of the foundation, the rooms painted in the color that looks like a held breath, the shelves with crooked boards, the women who have their hands back. I will think of a boy with rockets on scrap paper, and of a nurse who knew how to hold an envelope without opening it, and of a doctor who allows silence its own seat in the room. I will think of my children. I will hope that when they are old and someone they love asks them for help, they will answer with palms out, not pockets in. People ask me if I regret not leaving them the house. I tell them houses are not gifts. They are responsibilities wrapped in walls. I gave my children something heavier and lighter at once. The truth that what you do for strangers is sometimes what saves you. I gave them a map to a place where their mother's name sits above a door. They are finding their way there. One weekend at a time, and maybe, on some distant Sunday, their hands will stop shaking when they open envelopes because they will have nothing to fear inside. So that is the story of how a cheap home became an expensive lesson. How a sealed envelope made of paper held more weight than the voices that tried to fold me small. And how the quietest revenge is not to punish, but to build something that can hold the people your children forgot to be. If you felt any part of this in your bones, if you recognized the curve of a father's silence or the sound of a door closing with a soft click, tell me where you're watching from. Tell me if the light in your room is warm or blue, and tell me whether you have ever had to become both your own shelter and someone else's storm umbrella. And please, if this story touched you, like, share, comment, and subscribe.